It's my pleasure to be here tonight. Most of all, I hope to say some things that'll be helpful and meaningful to every single one of you. How many of you are parents? Would you mind raising your hands? How many of you are parents of adolescents? I am so sorry. But of course, I don't really mean that. But in today's world, it's not enough to know your kids' friends. You have to know the kids' friends' parents. You have to be the one that absolutely demands to know what's going on. Tonight, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about bullying, cyberbullying. We're going to talk about depression. We're going to talk about suicide. We're going to talk about the fact that it's the screen age. But perhaps most of all, I'd like to open with this statement. I hope every parent who's here tonight will tell your children, yes, they are the sons and daughters you always wanted. Between my wife and I, we have 4 children. And we always refer to all 4 of them are ours. And our son, Jeremy, he was only 3. He was in the grocery cart, and I'm looking through the bananas, and all of a sudden I hear this little voice say, "Dad, am I the boy you always wanted?" And I was able to enthusiastically tell him yes. And that's what I want you to tell your children tonight. They are the sons and daughters you always wanted, not for the person they might become, but just for the kid that they are today. 2 weeks ago, I made that statement in a parent meeting in Colorado. And the mom said, I texted my son. He's in college, but I told him, "You were the son I always wanted." He texted right back and he said, "I love you, Mom, and you're the mom I always wanted." Last week, I did speak again for Parkland parents, and I said something I truly believe. When a child lives in a stable home with unconditional love, they can overcome almost anything. And if you were listening, you could probably tell that it's a second marriage. And you know what really helped? My first wife is a psychologist. We made a pact. You don't talk badly about me to our children. I will never talk badly about you. And we never have. Jill, our youngest, when she would come to me and say something negative about her mom, my ex-wife, do you think there were times I wanted to pile on and add to it? But I never did, not a single time. I always remembered something. She will always be Jill's mother. She deserves my respect and certainly my financial support until Jill came of age. And the person very close to me, when she was 8, her dad left, leaving her mom with 3 kids. Her mom didn't even have a high school diploma to try to raise those kids. And her dad never called, never returned a letter, never sent a birthday gift, never contacted her for 40 years. Does anything make up for that? And we really need to understand that when we bring a child into this world, we are partners forever in raising those children. I imagine some of you are already thinking about kids you know that are in the middle every day between their parents and their disagreements. Stable homes, unconditional love. We're going to talk tonight about suicide, and now that I've mentioned that topic, I know that I can't be the only person here that had their life affected by a suicide. When I was 25, my dad died by suicide. I'm not really here to talk about him, but if you lost a friend, you lost a relative, or you knew one of the students in the Alachua County schools that died by suicide, I have some idea about what you've gone through. We can't prevent every suicide in this country, but we can prevent the majority. And we do that by talking about it. We need to bring it up. Let me quote our Surgeon General. 45,000 suicides a year in this country. We got to talk about it more in our homes, our schools, and in our churches. And when you bring it up, if a young person is actually suicidal, it gives them a chance to unburden themselves, a chance to realize, I am not alone. There is help available. By the way, if I pull out my iPhone and I were to push the button and I were to say to Siri, I want to kill myself, do you all know what happens? Siri says, may I connect you with the National Crisis Helpline? We don't have to remember complicated numbers. We just have to remember, push the button and tell Siri. So I know that it is a challenging time. I know, unfortunately, that the suicide rate for young people is at an all-time high. We're talking about the second leading cause of death for teenagers. I know the suicide rate has gone up in every state in this country except one, Nevada. I know that the suicide rate has gone up for every age group, every gender, and every race. I also know that many young people have been exposed to trauma and loss. Common sense media. Have you ever heard of it? Common sense media is a wealth of information for you. By the way, I could spend the next hour talking about all the unsafe and incorrect messages that were in 13 Reasons Why. How many of you saw that program? I'm just curious. Well, many, many students saw that program. Perhaps what bothered me the most, the adults were never seen as go-to people. It was like the adults did not exist in kids' lives. There were no adults at schools that had significant relationship. It was like the parents did not exist. They were either absent, clueless, or in the case of Justin's parents, downright mean. That was a very unfortunate message. If your children were here tonight, and a few of them are, I would have a really simple question. Who is your go-to adult at school? Who is your go-to adult at home and in the community? You see how concerned I would be when a kid cannot give me a go-to adult at school. So I was in Rapid City, South Dakota on Friday. Had a middle school principal said, I surveyed all the 8th graders, and I was very distressed that 24% of them said they did not have a go-to adult at school. You know what my greatest hope is? Every kid walking into an Alachua County school tomorrow sincerely believes somebody cared whether they showed up today or not. Now, common sense media has a wealth of information. You want to know if the video game's appropriate? You want to know if the movie's appropriate? The television programs? They're going to tell you. You know what they said about 13 Reasons Why? And I agree. Nobody under 16 should ever watch it, period. And if you're over the age of 16, you've had problems with being the victim of bullying, you've been anxious, you shouldn't watch it even then. So this idea that we watch it with our children, I don't think that's very practical. And the suicide scene was horrific. They should have never subjected anybody to that. And by the way, suicide is not about revenge. Suicide is about tunnel vision, unendurable pain, constriction. And thankfully, what's the good news? The vast majority of the kids that are bullied, they do not attempt or die by suicide. And we will talk about that more. But what's the most important point behind me? 46% of 10 to 23-year-olds said if parents paid attention, they would actually change their online behavior. Sometimes I say, don't let technology steal your children. But people have jumped up and said they've already been stolen. We need to be very careful at the early ages. We should not be in a hurry for all this technology. By the way, it is a privilege. It is not a right. In August, I spoke to 6th grade parents at orientation. I said things like this. Your happiness cannot depend on whether or not your 11-year-old likes you right at this moment. You are the parent. I almost wanted to have them stand up and repeat after me, I am the parent. I talked about technology being a privilege, not a right. The principal called me the next day, said, Scott, the parents love what you had to say. They want you to come back. Why would I come back? They're going to tell their children why they're going to change things, and they want you to do that. So it's a little bit like they missed the point. One more example from university school where my wife was the principal. You know what's really amazing? A private school, what you get if you can pay $25,000 a year for your kid's education. What would I do? I'd spend that amount of money on every single kid in America, not just the kids that have rich parents. I was there a couple of weeks ago and the mom said, I got 5 kids here. I just did the math. That's a lot of money. That's more than a professor's salary just after taxes for education. But my wife said, Scott, one of the parents heard you speak. He wants you to go to lunch with him. He's having some trouble with his kid. Oh, and by the way, he may be the richest man you will ever meet. He buys and sells corporations. Remember, I pointed out his yacht to you on the Intercoastal. It's one of the 10 largest in the entire world. So we go to lunch. Right away, he says, I'm having problems with my son. I figured out what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy the best life coach money can buy to work with my kid. I thought to myself, I could be a life coach. Aren't every single one of you life coaches? If you've been listening, I'm sure you figured out what I said to him. Be his dad now. Be involved and present in his life. Do not hire somebody else to be the significant influence in your kid's life. As soon as I said that, I knew I was never going out on that yacht. So, as much as 6.5 hours a day on their screens. The screens are interfering with sleep. The screen is under the pillow. The bottom line, our secondary schools start way too early. Teenagers are chronically sleep deprived. I used to think it was easy. You just get them to bed early. But teenagers are not wired to go to bed early. So the bottom line, what am I suggesting here? Honey, it's 10 o'clock. Time for bed. Hand me all of your technology. It will be charged and I'll hand it back to you in the morning. Now, I made that statement in Atlanta. A mom stayed behind to talk to me. Here's what she said. But what if my 13-year-old's friends needed to talk to her in the middle of the night? They would not be able to reach her. What about your daughter's friend if something is so serious? How about going to her own parents? And I guess if you want to answer your daughter's phone at 2:30 a.m., you can. You know, I could not convince her. She walked away believing her daughter needed to be available 24/7. Do you know what I hear from moms? It's my husband. I believe in technology-free meal times, but he will not turn off his screen. By the way, I'm really glad to see some dads here. When dads are involved, the research says we have healthier, happier, better achieving kids at school. The message is, take charge of the technology. But some of you have adolescents. There's already quite a pattern that has been set. I would simply say, sit around the kitchen table, talk with them about a reasonable plan to decrease the screen time. Some schools, some families are scheduling a blackout day or a blackout afternoon or evening where we might actually talk to each other and maybe do something really old-fashioned like get out a board game. And those screens are interfering in so many ways. Sleep, exercise, and even interpersonal relationships. We could argue our teens today are more connected than ever before, but they're also more isolated. A lot of times they're just home. And by the way, stop setting your adolescence room up to be a little kingdom. If I have my music, my movies, my television, all of my technology, why am I coming out of that room? Only one reason. Sandy made dinner. But why don't we try to take that plate of food and take it back to my room? And you know, McDonald's has this saying, the full value meal. Do you know where that actually is? That's around your kitchen table or in your dining room. Free and easy communication between kids and parents. And if you're divorced like I was, it makes it a little harder. I had to say, Jill, Wednesday night, that's when we're all around our kitchen table. And you're going to have to figure out a way to be there every Wednesday night. Now, I mentioned university school. At university school, those kids have so many activities. The activities cause them stress. The school team, the club team, the school arts, the community arts. I have a simple thought. Don't you want your kid's life to revolve around your family? How about one activity a season? Very important that we make sure that families are the hubs for everything for our children. I want to talk about the screens in the car. Where I worked in the schools, we had more than 100,000 students. I was the go-to guy after every tragedy, whether I wanted to be or not. I responded to countless car accidents. I'm in the classroom. I'm talking to his classmates, his best friends, his younger sister. The irony is, the phone that you bought for safety represents a tremendous danger in the car. Have you ever heard this phrase? Do not be intoxicated. You know what kids say? I look up like every 5 seconds or so. What's the big deal? I think we all know what could happen in 5 seconds. And by the way, if I don't wear my seatbelt, if I drink and drive, if I text while I drive, why would I not expect all 4 of our children and our grandchildren to also do the same thing? There's a great quote. What we do speaks so loudly to our children that when we try to talk to them, they cannot hear us. Kids are watching everything the adults in their lives do. And hopefully we're nice to our partners or our ex-partners. And by the way, working with 5th graders in Texas, you know, the kid was really proudly telling me all about the state bird, the state capital, the state motto. And then he says, I know the Texas song. Oh, what's that? All my exes live in Texas. So I don't want to belabor this point, but we have to get along with our ex-partners. And by the way, our son, the minister, he has 6 children. Would one of you please tell him to stop? But when we go to his church, my wife, my ex-wife, and myself, we all sit together. Everybody's nice. The birthdays, the graduation, now with these 15, soon to be 16 grandchildren, everybody's nice. Isn't that what every single kid in America deserves? To have all of the adults get along. So, balancing the screen time. What about a usage contract in our family? And by the way, there's technology that can help us in so many ways. Do you know that the phone can be programmed so that it doesn't work during study times? Phones can be programmed so they do not work in a moving vehicle. You can use all that technology to really be on top of things. And when your kid is the technology guru in your family, you've already got a problem. And what I think we need to do in our schools is, Alachua County schools, they have technology experts. They need to keep you up to date. I learned one the other day. There's actually an app, it's called the Secret Calculator. Okay, we would naively think it's a calculator, right? Well, the reason it's called a secret calculator is you hide all the other apps you're not supposed to have inside that one. So these are the kind of things that we have to keep up on. And I do know the navigation feature in the car is unbelievable. By the way, when was the last time you actually unfolded a map to try to get somewhere? But that navigation feature should be totally on the auditory mode. It should be talking to you as opposed to you staring at it while you're trying to drive. I'm a very big believer in telling children the truth and using developmentally appropriate language. So our son was 8 years old. Jeremy, I need to talk to you more about the death of your grandfather. So he says, I already know what happened to him. You told me he had a heart attack. That's true, son. Yes, he did have a heart attack. But I was waiting to give you more complete information. 2 weeks after his heart attack, your grandfather actually shot himself. He died by suicide. He looks up at me and said, you lied to me. No, son, I didn't really lie. Waiting to give you more complete information. He thinks a while, and then he says, oh, Dad, you shouldn't feel bad. Well, why is that, son? Well, your parents weren't both psychologists like mine are. They couldn't taught you all the things I know about how important it is to feel good about yourself. And I mean, everybody has problems. You just have to know to get help. Now, wasn't that sweet? He was trying to alleviate my guilt. What's the most important thing? He's 8 years old. He believes he's a good person. Isn't that what you want for every single kid who's here tonight? Every single kid in your community? Don't you want them to just believe, I am a good person, I am worthwhile, I am loved? And that's very easy for us to say, but how do we truly make sure every single one of them feels that way? When tragedies happen, it's very important to resume routines, get kids back into school as quickly as possible. You might be wondering, what are a kid's typical reaction to a traumatic event? They regress academically, they regress behaviorally, they have nightmares, sleeping problems, and worries about the future. Those aren't the atypical reactions. Those are almost every single time reactions. We want the parents to respond with patience, structure, routines, tolerance, and most importantly, that unconditional love. Jeremy loved basketball. You know what the most important point here is? He chose basketball. Obviously, I wanted to support him in the activities he wanted. By the way, I can still hear him dribbling 2 balls in the kitchen. We had a little goal inside. Most importantly, we put a goal outside, and we put lights in the driveway. Do you know what Jeremy knew? Anytime, day or night, I would rebound for him. No matter how tired I was, if he said, "Dad, will you rebound?" I'd get off the couch, I'd go out there, flip on the lights. All I'm doing is standing underneath the basket and a nice chest pass back. Jeremy's relaxed, he's doing something he enjoys. All of a sudden he starts talking to me, telling me all these things I want to know about because I'm his dad, and I would respond with something really insightful based on years of graduate study with my best, wow, I'm not really sure. That's a hard one, son. What are you thinking? Do you think any of your children want you to say, do this, do that? You won't have a problem. They simply want to be listened to. There are no magic words. The magic words are the closest we have are simply, I care. I'm here to listen anytime you want to talk. Many years ago, I faced 3,500 Columbine parents right after that tragedy. My message was, reach out, do not preach to your child. Find the shared time when your kid will truly talk to you. We're going to talk about the keys to resiliency. Resiliency, it's the ability to bounce back from adversity. It's largely learned. What are the keys to resiliency? Being surrounded by loving and caring family and friends, being comfortable venting and sharing strong emotions, being optimistic about the future, and having problem-solving skills. I've got a question for you, though. Can you all think of the person in your life who gives you the benefit of their negativity like every time you see them? Can you think of that person who's so negative in your life? Here's your tip for tonight. Stay away from that person. Seek out the people in your life that are positive and encouraging. Now, there are 4 cabinets that are in your home. Let's take the gun cabinet first. I'm not here to question an adult's right to own a gun, but with that right comes a responsibility to safeguard that gun from a troubled, impulsive, substance abusing, depressed, mentally ill person that might reside in your very own home. Do you know what I believe we need in this country? We need to start holding the adults accountable. If it was your gun that your kid used to injure themselves or injure or kill other people, you should be prosecuted. The states that prosecute, it's listed as a misdemeanor. It's similar to getting a traffic ticket. How do we get parents' attention? Now, right now, we pretty much have a national problem with kids without thinking, impulsively or stupidly posting or saying threatening things about school violence. Do you know, with our new legislation, your 11-year-old kid could be prosecuted as a second-degree felony. We got to talk to our kids and all of our students. There are just certain things you do not say in today's world. And bottom line, everybody got the message that you don't talk about violence at an airport, right? Well, how do we help our kids understand you don't talk about violence at school either? This is a national challenge right now, and it's interfering with a lot of education. So, first cabinet to take charge of in your home is the gun cabinet. Second cabinet is the liquor cabinet. You know what I said to our kids? The law is 21. I will not condone it. I will not provide it. I will not look the other way. And in my humble opinion, all four of your grandparents were alcoholics. Alcoholism runs in the Poland family. Somehow I don't think we're alone in that. I was encouraging our children not to drink at all, but you're going to have to wait until you are 21. Third cabinet to take charge of, that would be the medicine cabinet. If you have a lot of those opioids that you did not use, get rid of them. Lock them up. Lock up that cabinet so kids cannot get access to all of that medication. And the fourth cabinet, that's really the internet. I'm encouraging you to take charge of it. Here was an example from last week. I have twin 10-year-old boys. I try to monitor where they go on the internet. But when I have to put their 2-year-old younger brother to bed, I think they visit all those sites that I don't want them to go to. Do I need to police that better? Do I need to block those sites? Absolutely yes. Your kids are being exposed to things that they are simply not developmentally ready for. Now, if you're thinking about getting a laptop with a camera in it for your 12-year-old daughter, can you figure out what I'm going to say to you? Don't do it. The desktop, it sits on the kitchen counter. I don't care how many of her friends have a laptop with the camera. I'm sorry to tell you that sexting has developed into a very big problem and sadly has contributed to suicides of young people. I'm also sorry to tell you tonight, the most dramatic rise in suicides in this country, middle school age girls and middle-aged men. So, pretty well covered the points that are on this one, except the last one. I often find there's a very big difference between what parents think is going on in their kids' lives and what is actually happening. Some kids, unfortunately, are leading secret lives that have to do with sex, drugs, and reckless behavior. Moving on again, the car accidents. Why do I feel so strongly about this? Because I had to respond to so many deaths of kids in car accidents. Jill had a good one. When she was 15, she said, "Oh, Dad, because you and Mom are divorced, I could get a hardship license. I could drive a year early." Oh, great, Jill. Really interested in having you driving a year early in the fourth biggest city in America. I don't think we're going to be doing that. By the way, how many of you know what graduated driving laws are? Raise your hand if you know. Well, unfortunately, not very many of you. Graduated driving laws, which Florida has, they restrict the hours for a young driver. You can't drive after dark for like 6 months. They restrict the number of passengers. You can't have anybody in your car under the age of 21 for like 6 months. Sorry to tell you, 16-year-olds die 3 times more often in a car accident than an 18-year-old. Why? It's inexperience. It's being easily distracted. Don't be in a hurry to put your kid behind the wheel. By the way, when Jill started driving, you know what I missed? I missed all that time we had together. I was the parent that would say, "I don't care how far away your friend lives, Jill. Let's go get her and bring her to our house." And by the way, when we were driving to get her friend, that was a chance for Jill to talk and for me to really listen. And on the way back with Jill and her friends in the back seat, I am so quiet and I am learning so much about what's really going on in the lives of these 2 girls. We can do a lot to prevent car accidents that claim the lives of nearly 3,000 kids every single year. And I'll repeat again, the phone in the car is a problem. It often contributes to the accident. We talked about not putting them in the middle of divorces. Let's go to the restitution example. So Jeremy was about 4. We never believed in spanking. His discipline was always timeout. You know why it worked? He didn't like to be sent to his room. One day he's shaking the floor lamp. He looks up and he knows he's got to go to timeout, but he's really angry about it. And as he walks into his room, he throws open the door, and I see the doorknob go right through the drywall. Was I angry? Was I upset? Did I want to yell at him? Maybe even shake him? Yes, but I don't do any of those things. I walked to the other end of the house. When I came back, I was very calm. Jeremy, how are you going to fix the hole you put in the wall of your room? He doesn't know he's 4 years old. He starts crying. Jeremy, get your piggy bank. Come with me. We went to the hardware store. Jeremy paid for the materials with his money, and he helped me patch up the hole in that wall. Restitution. You break it, you hurt somebody's feeling. You need to do whatever you can to make it right. Another school example. The kid was really mad at the high school principal on a special campus. And as he walks out, he slams that door with all of his might. He cracks the door frame. The cost to repair it is $175. So let's call him Tom. We have a meeting with Tom and his parent. I have a pretty simple question. Tom, how are you going to repair the door? He doesn't know. He says he doesn't have any money. The parents say they don't have any money. Okay, we anticipated that. Tom, you will be staying after school every day for X days, helping the custodian. You will be taking the late bus home. Tom doesn't stay a single time. And about a week later, the principal says, we got a check in the mail. They turned it in on their homeowner's policy. Is that what we wanted? Kids must be held accountable from an early age. And no, I do not believe we can be their best friends. We need to be constantly reminded we are the parent. So I said, I'm glad dads are here. When Jeremy had his first child, I had a simple piece of advice. Whatever it is, son, every single aspect of child care, you need to do 50% or more. Margaret Mead had a great quote. Perhaps a true measure of society is, can we teach the men to be good fathers? When dads are involved, healthier, happier, better achieving kids. Some rather sad data for you. Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey, done every 2 years by the Center for Disease Control. They survey kids on basically every at-risk behavior you could ever think of. I'm just going to zero in on suicide. Let's look at the bottom line there. In the last 12 months, surveys of Florida high school students say 7.6% of them made a suicide attempt. Who's the most likely to make an attempt tomorrow? That's the kid with the history. Do you know what's really scary, though? For the most part, our schools, personnel, our parents, they have no idea. And to put that in the scope of a 2,000 student high school right here, what does that figure mean? 152 of them that walked into that high school this morning made an attempt within the last 12 months. And unfortunately, most of the time, the adults in their lives have absolutely no idea. So who knows all about the suicide attempts? That would be their friends. The friends we've never talked to about what to do to help your friends, the importance of getting adult help. And the states that do this survey for middle school, the figures are even higher than that for high school. So this is a very big problem. And to repeat again, we got to talk about this more. Our homes, our schools, and our churches. Okay, let me talk about bullying for a moment. Well, first of all, do any of you remember growing up in a home where there was one telephone? Anybody remember when there was actually a cord on that phone? And I swear to you, my mom sat next to that phone my entire adolescence. Was I ever on the phone in the middle of the night? Did I ever have a long, anguishing conversation with anybody? And by the way, when I walked in that house, it was a safe haven. Nobody could reach me unless they wanted to talk to my mom first. You immediately know all the ways the world has changed because of all of the technology. And when somebody posts something, here's what I sometimes hear. Okay, Scott, one thing was posted online, but that doesn't meet the definition of bullying because bullying has to be repetitive. I mean, yes, it was about power, it was nasty and humiliating, but it was only one thing. Wait a minute, 42 kids signed on that they agreed with that post. You know what our school personnel say? Investigating cyberbullying is a bit of a slippery slope. Sometimes they don't want to do it. But cyberbullying always impacts learning. Middle school counselors will say, a lot of drama on Monday because of all the things that were posted online. When it's posted online, it's basically there forever. It's continual. And it's like, parents must pay attention. You need to demand to have all of the passwords. You need to periodically check to see what website your kid is going to, what kind of messages they are exchanging with their friends. And perhaps the most disappointing thing is only about 1/3 of the time does the victim of bullying tell an adult. Why is that? They think it'll only get worse. They don't think the adults will do anything. They don't have a go-to adult. By the way, there's a guy named Jamie DeBosny. He was the first kid in America ever successfully sue the school for failing to protect him from bullying. And in the documentary Bullied, which is available free from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Jamie says something like this. When it happens to you enough times, you start to think you deserve it. No kid deserves to be bullied. And the response from all adults must be, we are going to get this stopped. This is not your fault. And what if you go to the teacher first, she doesn't do anything? Then you have to go to the assistant principal. What if she doesn't do anything? Then you go to the principal. What if they don't do enough? Then you go to the superintendent. You have to tell your kids, I am here for you every single step of the way. I also hope you help all of your kids find their niche. What do I mean by that? An activity that they're pretty darn good at. A particular group or an event where they are treated well. That goes a long way to helping them. And the other thing that's critically important, if you know a kid is a victim of bullying, do not hesitate to ask them questions about giving up and, yes, thoughts of suicide. Pretty well have covered those points, except I'd be remiss today not to stress, unfortunately, LGBT students have suicide rates, both attempts and deaths, many times that of their heterosexual peers. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think is the single greatest protective factor for a gay kid in America? If you would, just turn to your neighbor. Tell your neighbor, what is the single greatest protective factor for a gay kid in this country? I heard it from almost everyone. Parental acceptance. One of my friends is Michael. He's a very nice man. He's a fabulous teacher. Michael said to me years ago, Scott, when I came out, my dad said, Michael, you are dead to me. Michael's dad has not spoken to him in 22 years. How do we make sure that kind of thinking does not continue in our country? And certainly special education students are also very much at risk to be bullied. Now I'm going to talk a little bit very specifically about depression and suicide. Here's what I often hear from a parent. How do I know he's really depressed? I mean, come on. Aren't almost all teenagers moody, irritable? I think he's preparing me for he's going out of state to school next year. Well, Mom and Dad, let me ask you a couple questions. Is this persistent? Has this gone on for 2 or 3 weeks or more? Yes. Is this pervasive? Is this affecting home, school, and peer relationships? Yes. Has he dropped out of what were previously pleasurable activities? Yes, as a matter of fact. He always played on the basketball team. This year as a senior, he said, I don't care about it anymore. Mom and Dad, you have a depressed kid. 20% of all teens suffer from depression at some point during those tumultuous years, and unfortunately about 80% of them receive no treatment whatsoever. Now, I worked in schools full-time for 26 years. Do you know what your school counselors are doing? Clerical, scheduling, and testing duties. There's simply not enough of them. Do you know what your school psychologists are doing? They're totally consumed by special education assessments. Social workers don't have those constraints, but there's far too few of them. So Broward County had a report after Parkland. It just came out. What do they need to do to get the right amount of mental health professionals in the schools? They need over $200 million. That's how few staff members they have. Florida, I'm going to be honest, Florida ranks pretty much next to last with regards to education and mental health spending. We are desperately in need of more funding. And at the simplest level, I believe schools and children should come first. Here's the quote. Those children in your schools right now, they are messengers we send to a time that we're never going to see. Children are the future of our country. Why would we not provide better funding for children's education and certainly for their mental health? I'd be remiss tonight not to stress the fact depression is treatable. Kids can't just snap out of it. They need evidence-based treatment. And the most effective treatment is when we have traditional talk therapy in combination with carefully prescribed and monitored medication. Tips for parents. Bottom line is you cannot be afraid to talk about suicide with your child. Too often, this is the kind of example. The kid was hospitalized because they were suicidal. Now they're out of the hospital, like a month has gone by. What's like the last thing in the world Mom and Dad are probably ever going to bring up? In fact, they may be thinking, thank God that's over and I don't have to worry about that anymore. You know what they should be doing? Finding the shared time, talking with their kid and saying something gently like, have you ever had those thoughts again? It wouldn't be unusual to have those thoughts again. What could you do? Do you remember your safety plan? I'm here for you every step of the way. Do you remember all the crisis resources? The rest of those points are pretty straightforward. Act immediately to get help. Go to the schools, share information, get the community referral. Secure any guns in your home. Houston teenagers goodbye note. It was addressed to her parents. Why did you make this so easy? Why did you leave this gun available to me? There's a website at Harvard. It's called Means Matter, meansmatter.com. They surveyed the research all around the world. You remove the lethal means. You raise the barrier on the bridge, which they're finally doing at the Golden Gate Bridge. That barrier will be in place for 2020. You remove the means, the suicide rates go down dramatically. I'd be remiss today not to stress to you warning signs, dramatic changes in behavior, being overwhelmed, giving away prized possessions, making out a will. Very important. We recognize those signs and we reach out. The very next slide has to do with protective factors. You might be wondering, where did I get the protective factors? They come from the World Health Organization. having a good relationship with other young people. But who does one disturbed kid likely go to for help? A disturbed kid likely goes to another disturbed kid. And the two of them don't know enough to get an adult involved. The rest of these are pretty straightforward. Religion is a wonderful protection factor. It is a great place to belong and build those connections. Access to mental health care, a school environment that promotes wellness. Working in schools all those years, I'd often get referred to a boy with the behavior problem. Let's call him Tom. Teachers give me a long litany of everything Tom is doing wrong. When it was appropriate, I would ask, what's Tom want to be when he grows up? Does he have a pet at home? What's he do with his free time? Too often, the teachers could not answer any of those questions. When I come back, I want to check in with you. Find out more about Tom's hopes and dreams. Bottom line, do I think an 8th grader in Florida actually cares about their state accountability test score? I don't think so. Do you know what they actually care about? That would be pleasing their teacher, but only if the teacher cares about their hopes and dreams. When Jill was in high school, she was in a massive high school. She would come home in the middle of a school year and say, Dad, my English teacher doesn't even know my name. She's got me confused with 2 or 3 other girls with long brown hair and braces. Since I believe Jill was one of the most wonderful kids who ever lived, can you see how frustrating it is that her teacher doesn't know her name, let alone her hopes and dreams? And every parent here tonight, I hope you sincerely believe your sons and daughters are the most wonderful kids who ever lived. You believe that. You show them that every day, every way. You've given them a tremendous advantage in this world. We have one more slide about protective factors. Family cohesion and stability. We talked about that. You know what I wish I could give you tonight? Magic dust to sprinkle it over the head of every kid in Alachua County. Don't you want every kid to just believe I'm a good person, I'm loved, I'm cared about? That's what all of them need. Key points: recognize the developmental levels. I believe kids are being exposed to many things way too early. Pay attention to all of the violence they are exposed to. Realistic academic expectations. I mentioned this at dinner tonight. I actually got kicked out of college the first time for poor scholarship. All I can tell you is I was unmotivated. I would have been a lousy accountant. I got drafted during the Vietnam War. When I went back to college, I was a little better student. And if you listen to that introduction, maybe I turned out okay. But what my main point is this: lots of your children are going to stumble. They aren't all going to get into the University of Florida. There are many ways to success. Some of them may need to work a while. Somebody else might need to start in a community college. There are lots of ways to be successful in this country. And sometimes the academic pressure on our kids can be overwhelming. So we want to be realistic. Now it's baseball season. I'm obviously following the Houston Astros, but I thought about something. I used my most persuasive manner to try to convince parents your kid needs mental health treatment outside of the school. You need to seek services in the community. Let me help you find them. I know these service providers. I very much believe they would help your child. So the question is, what was my batting average? How many times did those parents actually follow through? I batted about 200, 2 for 10. I'd have never made a baseball all-star team. How do we get parents to actually follow through? And how in our state do we make those mental health services efficient, available, and affordable? Resiliency. Some of you may know somebody that after the trauma and the loss, it was like their life was over. Maybe they never reinvested in relationships. Maybe they turned to drugs. Maybe, sadly, they even ended their life. But you also know people that they're always going to be sad about what happened, but they went on with their lives. They were surrounded by loving, caring family and friends. They were comfortable venting strong emotions. They used problem-solving skills, and they were always optimistic about the future. The Carnegie Foundation, they weighed in on what do kids need to be successful. 3 or more significant adults in their lives besides their parents. Although most of us have said, let's just try to find one. Too often, it's mom, she moved here. All the extended family is back in Pittsburgh. So her daughter is singing in the choir at church on Sunday. Who's going to show up? Is the retired Navy guy next door going to show up? Oh, he's got his final soccer game of the fall. Who's going to show up simply to say, you are important to me? Well, I'm really proud to tell you something. 1974, I signed up to be a big brother to Rodney in Indiana. Rodney was 13 then. Rodney is turning 57 this month. I have not talked to Rodney now for a couple of days. Want me to be honest? Rodney never had anybody, never knew his dad. His mom's on welfare. Do you know what the waiting list is to get a big brother in virtually any place in America? Try 4 years. You sign up when you were 10 and somebody gets matched with you and you're 14. You don't care about it anymore. You know what the waiting list is to get a big sister? Try 4 months. That says a lot about the differences between men and women stepping forward and getting involved in kids' lives. By the way, when our youngest, Jill, graduated from college, first thing she did, she signed up to be a big sister to Anna, who's a 12-year-old girl in Houston. We need to model getting involved. I heard a great introductory remark from Pamela. She said, they're all our children. All the children in Alachua County, they're all ours. A sense of safety, security, and belonging, and our home, schools, and neighborhood. And I do want to say something about schools. Schools are the safest places your children go. Having said that, of course, I believe one violent death on a school grounds in America is unacceptable. But I think you actually know where most kids in America get murdered, and it is certainly not at school. We got to work on safety and prevention, not just in our schools, but in our homes and in our neighborhoods. Okay, organized activities. I said that in some of the really high socioeconomic schools, the extracurricular activities cause kids stress. And I suggested one activity a season. But at the other end of that spectrum, where most kids are, that has to do with broken families and poverty. So let's call him Lee. Lee was a kid at Millsap Elementary School that I provided counseling to weekly for years. One day Lee comes in and he says, Dr. Poland, you know what I want to do more than anything? I just want to play Little League Baseball. Well, great, Lee. I saw the forms in the office. Let's get one. We'll get you signed up. Oh, you don't understand. My mom, she doesn't have $70. And ever since our daddy left us, there's no way I could get to a practice because my mom works after school and nights. That's the case for most kids in America. So I signed up to coach soccer. Jeremy was 5. Do I know anything about it? No, but as a psychologist, I know what my goal was. Make this fun. Make kids want to play every single fall because we are going to have fun. That first year, Bobby Bryan's name was on my roster. He's not at the first practice. I left a message for his mom. I finally get her on the phone. She says, take his name off your list. My husband left. He moved out of state. I'm working after school. I can never take him to your practice. Well, Claire, where is he after school? Well, he's in a daycare. Claire, if you will give me written permission, I will pick him up. I will take him to practice, and I will not return him to your house until you're home from work. Do you know that I drove Bobby Bryan to practice, except the last year he was 17 and he drove himself? We've got to step forward and get involved in kids' lives. And Bobby Bryan and I, we're actually friends on Facebook. He just had his second baby. Volunteer work. Here's my favorite quote. Perhaps the only way an adolescent can truly find themselves is through service to other people. You know what they actually learn? Guess what? The world does not revolve around you. That little upset you had with your 14-year-old friend, you can put that in perspective now if you're actually volunteering and helping people that have a very difficult life. And the other thought, as I'm looking at these ladies right here, we had 1 Million Moms March in 2000. It wasn't quite 1 million moms. They tried. And I was all for it. Do you know that the NRA has passed more than 9,000 pro-gun laws since 2000? Now we have a group of kids right now. They're from Parkland. They are not going to give up with the Never Again movement. Whether you agree with what they're advocating for or not, I'm simply going to say, if we ever have change in this world, it's going to have to come from our young people. And I don't think those Parkland students are going to give up at all. I've tried to gently say, it'd be okay for your kid to just go to college. It'd be okay for your kid just to concentrate on being a high school senior. They don't have to take on changing the world. But there was another great quote from Margaret Mead. I'm not sure I'm going to get it right. Didn't she say something like, it's only a few people that it takes, and it's a few people that can actually change the world. And the reality is, what I would be saying to every single one of you is that we need to be the difference we wish in this world. And for me, that's advocating for children. That's advocating for prevention. That's advocating for mental health. There is how to contact me. I promise you that I respond to every single email I have ever received. And my strongest encouragement, be present in your kid's life. I do know sometimes they attempt to push you away, but I believe they really want you involved. And 2 examples. So I'm meeting with students from Harriman High School in Utah, where sadly 7 kids died by suicide last year. And I said, I'm talking to all your parents tonight. What do you want me to say to them? We want them involved in our lives, but we want them listening more to us and talking less. On another location where I responded to a school shooting, I suggested to Principal Karen, write a letter that's going to be copied to every single one of the 2,000 students in your school. She said, what should be in the letter? Karen, it just needs to come from your heart. Let them know. They'll have a chance to talk about it, write about it. Music, artwork, projects, ceremonies, rituals. Just be honest with some of the things you are experiencing, but most importantly, invite them all to write back to you. What is it they need? I went back a week later. Karen had literally 2,000 letters on her desk. And I said, what are they asking for? What do they want? Well, in one way or another, every single kid is saying, I want my parents, my teachers, the adults in my life, I want them more involved. And I can tell that every single one of you is an involved adult. That's why you are here.
In 2018, there have been more teen suicides in Alachua County than in any previous year. Have you seen any communities succeed in lowering teen suicides? If yes, how did they do it?
First of all, I want to acknowledge that Alachua County is not alone with increases in suicides. So how did they do it? A community coalition is what is needed. NAMI involved, school leaders involved, community leaders, mental health, law enforcement, survivor groups, clergy, all working together. One frustration in traveling around the country and responding to this tragic turn of events is this simple. Physicians must get more involved. We have a national recommendation that came out 9 years ago saying every single teen seeing the doctor for any reason, they should fill out one of those short questionnaires about energy level, joy of life, thoughts of suicide, and it should be scored before they walk out of the office. Bringing everybody together, but in addition to the school leaders, you need the medical community. That is extremely important. The bottom line is about 70% of the time, the person who died by suicide actually went to see their family doctor shortly before they ended their life. So physicians have a tremendous opportunity to intervene. What else do we have, Pamela?
Can you comment on how all of this applies to technology use in schools, which seems to be increasing?
Technology use in schools is definitely increasing. I'm going to Texas soon, and I had a conference call about this meeting yesterday. They were a little concerned that my statements are against technology. I see all the tremendous advantages of learning using technology, but we really need to pay attention to all the activities that are more about entertainment and other things, especially cyberbullying and finding information that is not really appropriate for their age. So it's a balance. I believe schools are using technology in many very beneficial educational ways. But in our schools, we also have to pay attention that they're actually utilizing that iPad or that computer right now for learning purposes. But I think the biggest challenge is for our parents to pay more attention. The other day, a dad said to me, well, you know, my kid's upstairs in his room. I know he's on technology right now. Like, I'll just send him a message. Dad, I think you should walk up the stairs, like actually physically sit down and talk to your kid. He's only a few feet away.
How can I fix what I have said to my daughters, 8 and 13, about their father who has been in and out of their life for years and no contact with them the past year?
A very challenging question, because it sounds like that mom has pretty much had to do everything. I'd like to think that other adults in the school and the community have stepped forward, friends, neighbors, uncles, for example. And how do we help a child understand that you are the most important person to me? Unfortunately, your dad is missing a whole lot. Hopefully at some point he will change his behavior, or he's just not thinking straight. This has nothing to do with your worth as a person. But the bottom line is we can say all those things, and it's still pretty hard to make that go away. Perhaps most importantly, always be there to talk to your daughter. Most importantly, to listen to anything and everything they want to say about the dad's absence from their life.
If your child shares information about an at-risk child, what is the best response to provide help to that child? School, their parent, or reaching out yourself?
Okay, great question. So, one of my friends shared this example. Carl, his son, came to his dad and said, you know, the girl I broke up with last week, she's sending me these messages, she's going to kill herself. So Rick, my best friend, turned to Carl and said, get your coat. Carl said, why do I need my coat? We live in Kansas, it's cold, it's the winter, get your coat. We're going to her house. Now, some of you might not be that comfortable with actually getting in the car right now and driving to their home. Maybe you don't necessarily even know where they live. But there are a lot of things you can do. Depending on the urgency, you could call 911. you could contact someone at school. Maybe you know the phone number for the family home line, if they still have one. You need to take immediate action. And yes, it's possible that somebody will be mad at you for a while, but you know in your heart you did the right thing. Let's see if you can finish this sentence. Snitches get... It's very unfortunate you all know that, isn't it? So, if Art gets help for his elderly neighbor, are we going to call him a snitch? Are we going to call him a good, responsible person? And a good, responsible person would take action, realize that they've got to let adults at school and home know about this at-risk behavior.
A question from a child who's a young man in 10th grade. I'm a good person. I make good grades. I like to play football and baseball, and I get enough sleep. Why should I be limited in screen time playing games?
You just gave me very healthy indicators for a kid. You're saying they're successful in school, they're involved in a number of activities. And it's not that I'm totally opposed to video games. I'm just always looking for a balance. And parents always know their children the best. Are they isolating from the family? Are they not developing those good in-person skills of interacting? Well, then maybe there's too much time. But if they're successful in pretty much everything, and they are cooperative and pleasant and nice with everybody in their lives, then we can relax it a little bit. Sometimes I get this question: this kid likes a violent video game, should I be worried? Well, tell me more about him. Well, he's actually really sweet to his little sister. He's successful in school. He's in an organized something. He goes places with mom and dad, and he does a good job of taking care of the family pet. All right, I'm going to relax. You just gave me many healthy indicators for a kid. But what if you didn't give me any of those healthy things? You said he's totally isolated from adults. You said he's really mean to his little sister. He never apologizes when he hurts anybody's feelings. And he tried to microwave our cat last weekend. I just gave you a lot of very disturbing, in fact, FBI warning signs, in addition to fascination with violence and violent video games. It's all a balance, and you know your children the best.
If a kid wants to speak to an adult in the middle of the night, how do we navigate this?
If a kid wants to speak to an adult in the middle of the night, I really hope they would feel comfortable going to their own parents. I mean, kids are not living by themselves. They are living with adults. And the bottom line, all the parents that are here tonight, don't you want to be the go-to adult in your kid's life? You want there to be others, but you want to be that person. And if there's some reason why they don't see you that way, then there may be some things that you need to change. Maybe you really do need to be a much better listener.
What age group is social media appropriate for, and are there positives to adolescent involvement in social media groups?
All I can do is give you my opinion. I'd really like to see social media reserved for middle school, not elementary. And I know with one of my grandsons, he's upset because apparently it's Fortnite that's a really big game right now. And it's like, he feels like, because he doesn't have the technology access he wants, he's like not in the conversations, not in the groups. Again, you decide, parents, but I think there's so many things that should at least be reserved to middle schoolers that we do not need. I mean, does a 7-year-old kid need a social media presence? I don't think so. Thank you very much for the chance to be here. Thanks for coming.